Hello again, folks. How are you doing? Today is Friday. I believe it is the 13th day of October, 2023. It's about 10:50. About exactly 10:50 in the morning. Nice day, kind of overcast down here in Florida. Some shit's going to happen tomorrow. Don't know what's going to happen. We'll find out, and I'll let you guys know once it does. That's the kind of stuff. That's the stuff I was talking about the other day, last week sometime, saying some shit was happening. We'll find out tomorrow. Back to Gaza. Someone sent me, thank you very much, you know who you are. Someone sent me a link to this. Ryan Christian decided to have another influencer on and ask the influencer what his thoughts on Israel-Gaza was, Israel-Palestine was. Of course, the influencer is Jimmy Dore wearing his news guy hat indoors. Jesus. And of course, he comes on and talks about this. This went up on the 10th. Jimmy brought in on his show Norman Finkelstein, which is good. Norman Finkelstein knows what he's talking about. Norman Finkelstein has been around and involved in that movement for quite some time. So he's a very good person to ask about what was happening over there. Good on Jimmy Dore. Bad on Ryan to have Jimmy Dore on because he wants to fucking benefit from his millions and millions of subscribers. And he's trying to grow his brand by having a failed comedian turned cue card reader, YouTube cue card reader, in Jimmy Dore. But to Jimmy's credit, and I will give him credit, he did have fucking Norman Finkelstein on. And it is up on his YouTube channel. In spite of the fact that it might cost him some of his precious fucking donations and supporters. Because, of course, we all know Jimmy Dore and Max Blumenthal and that set are trying to move the left further to the right by hitching their little fucking wagons to alt-right folks, who, by the way, are all in on supporting glorious Israel. No matter what, no matter how many fucking children glorious Israel kills. So good on Jimmy Dore for having Norman Finkelstein on. And I will say this as well. Good on Jimmy Dore for starting the conversation with, I'm no expert on the Israel-Palestine conflict. And throwing his hands up in that regard. So the question is, why the fuck would Ryan... We know why Ryan Christian had him on. And all Jimmy Dore did was regurgitate whatever he heard from Norman Finkelstein the day before. That's fine. You don't have to have articles dating back to 2008 and 2009 to be a goddamn... to give a shit about what's happening in Palestine. So I'll give Jimmy Dore the benefit of the doubt on that. I'll give him some credit. He did happen to say, again, push the notion that the IDF must have let this happen on purpose because, according to Jimmy Dore, and I'm sure he heard this from Finkelstein. I didn't go watch Finkelstein's interview with Dore. Dore just creeps me out so much I can't watch him. But he did say that because it's not just Hamas, it's not just their militant wing of Hamas, or the fighting wing of Hamas that was involved in this thing last Saturday. It was Al-Aqsa flood, then it became Al-Aqsa storm. So he did say that because there were other groups involved working along with Hamas's group, then the IDF must have known about it. Someone sent me a thing saying some ex-Israeli intelligence person says, oh, they moved a whole bunch of soldiers out of that area right before it happened. Okay, let me just start off. Before I give you the updates on what's happening, I just want to start off again addressing that bit of disinformation that's out there. What does it do? It steals victory from Hamas. There's an interesting article. I've cited it before. I will do one more time. You see, they changed the name. Shaken Israel is forced back into its eternal dilemma. However, the original name is up here. Hamas attack is a psychological blow to Israel. They couldn't have that. They couldn't have that, so they had to change the name. But there's the name, the original title of this article up here. And it makes a very strong point. Again, this is Roger Cohen. It's the most sweeping invasion of Israeli territory in decades, conducted by a Hamas force that had been widely seen as a ragtag collection of militants, has delivered a psychological shock to Israel so great that its very foundations are being questioned. Its army, its intelligence service, its government, and its capacity to control millions of Palestinians in its midst. That's written by a Jewish guy by the name of Roger Cohen. Okay? Whereas Jimmy Dore is not an expert on all things Israel-Palestine, Cohen is, but he's on one side, not the other. Now, I don't know if he heard that from Finkelstein or not. I would be surprised if Finkelstein is pushing that narrative. You're stealing fucking victory and you're handing it over to the fucking IDF. Oh, they let it happen on purpose. Let me explain something to you. In order for something you let something happen on purpose. Okay. Let's take 9/11, for example. That's the story anyway from the controlled opposition. They let it happen on purpose, which is fucking stupid. They made it happen with controlled demolition, but aside from that, let's just say that the let them happen on purpose crowd is right when it comes to 9/11. What is key to letting something happen on purpose? What is a key piece of evidence? Well, the key piece of evidence is, what did they get out of it? Why did they do it? In the case of 9/11, you got the global war of terror, which of course allows them to go around and invade and attack anybody, anywhere they want at any time, because they just go 9/11, and that's the end of the question. That's the end of the discussion. The Taliban, for one. Afghanistan was the first target. Iraq was the second target. There were several, places in that 7 years, 7 countries in 5 years. That was the plan. That's the plan. There was a plan, and the plan went into effect right after 9/11. Of course, the other thing is, the people who were in charge just happened to have penned a white paper exactly 365 days before 9/11 called Rebuilding America's Defenses, in which they stated without a new Pearl Harbor type event, this could take too long in order to get started. They needed something big, a new Pearl Harbor. And they got it. So, made it happen is what happened. But if you want to talk about let it happen on purpose, you have to answer the question. What did they want to get out of it when they let it happen on purpose? What's the answer? Embarrassment? Israelis questioning whether or not their government is fucking capable, competent? Israelis questioning the glorious IDF and the certainty they had that they could keep the quote-unquote animals on the other side of the zoo fence. Is that what they wanted? They wanted their own people to think they're not in control of jack shit? Because that's what they got. Don't believe me? go read the article from Roger Cohen. And it's not just, there's similar stuff in Haaretz. There's similar stuff being written in fucking Israeli periodicals and newspapers right fucking now. And they don't have to change their fucking titles of their articles and stuff because they're not, they don't suffer from the same malaise that we do here. So if they write something and they mean something, they put it in their fucking title and that's it. And they don't give a shit who says you got to change that. We don't have that luxury in the United States. So there's a lot of that going on. What else? What could they possibly want? You know, you got a bunch of people running around, you know, hyperbole dealers running around saying, you know, things like, you know, this is going to be the second Nakba. We're going to finally do away with the whole of fucking Gaza, and we're going to take all of Gaza and move the Palestinians off to that glorious land and take the land. Which, you know, I hate to say it, it plays into the fucking tropes and the stereotypes, but they have coveted that fucking piece of property for quite some fucking time. They want all of Palestine. They don't want to have any Palestine left. They want to do away with the theory of the two-state solution, which I've also seen people in the aftermath saying that. But these things are not going to happen. And in fact, they've just dropped a bunch of leaflets on the northern half of fucking Gaza, telling the civilians to leave because they're going to fucking do something. They're going to, you know, invade or bomb or whatever. Telling civilians to leave. It's an interesting fucking development. Is this the end game? Is this the goal, to get half of fucking Gaza? No. This is never let a good crisis go to waste. People spinning shit up as they're doing it, as things happen, but it's not the end goal because they're not going to get it. This wasn't the fucking overall scheme from the beginning. Let's drop a bunch of leaflets and see if we can get people to vacate the premises. If you are an occupying force and the people you are occupying choose on their own volition to leave and squeeze into a smaller space, leaving the other space open, well, that's on them. Then you can take that fucking space. But that's not what's going to happen because Hamas is telling people this is propaganda. They're damn sure not going to do a fucking ground invasion because every time they try to do a ground invasion in Gaza, the Israelis get fucked up. Even with their vast superiority in terms of firepower, the Israelis get fucked up. And they get fucked up because they're fighting people fighting for their homes and they're sending IDF soldiers who were fucking conscripts. Who didn't want to be there in the first goddamn place. And they're 19, 20 years old. They've never seen any fucking combat. So they get fucked up. Plus, it's going to be massive blowback. If they were to try to do something like that, there's going to be a huge price to pay in terms of international relations across the board. I'm going to show you numbers in a second on how many people have died, how many children have died. The numbers are up to 500, which I think topped cast lead. One of the two was really big. I think Pillar of Defense was the largest in terms of dead children. Cast lead was second. Now this thing has surpassed cast lead. I don't know if it surpassed Pillar of Defense as of yet, but it certainly surpassed cast lead. That's bad. That's very, very bad. This is not a good look for glorious Israel. And I don't care how many fucking stupid bullshit stories they came up with beheading children or juggling babies. They're not going to be able to rebound from that anytime soon. The other thing is this. Because this was such a failure on the part of Israel, making the IDF look bad, making fucking the intelligence, making the Mossad look bad, making political structure look bad, and then of course making the world take a look at how fucking Israel is actually handling this occupation situation. In the end, even the alt-right people are going to have to get on the right side of this and understand that the people who are occupied have a right to resist. John Brown's rebellion did. The people in fucking the Warsaw Ghetto and their uprising, they had a right to resist. People of Donbass, they had a right to resist. Native Americans in this country, they had a right to resist. At some point in time, even the glorious Israel worshipers of the alt-right, they're going to have to get on the right side of this. Now, I ask you this, and I want you to think about this hard. What did Israel get out of this? Because it's not looking like they got a whole lot. And sooner rather than later, some people are going to have to be fired in Israel. So I'm not seeing, the let it happen on purpose people from believing in that with 9/11. They got what they wanted. Everything was they clearly had fucking goals, the people who did it. And in terms of failure, they all failed up. They all got fucking advancements. They all got promotions. They all got fucking, stock options given to them on the sly. They got paid. These guys are going to get fired. We're talking about a lot of them. If it hasn't happened already. And of course, it's not just the overseas governments. And of course, governments in the Middle East and the United Kingdom. The European Union. It's not just the leadership of those. It's also leadership of Jewish organizations that are overseas, that are outside of Israel. Because this is going to reflect badly on Jewish people as a whole. They didn't get anything out of this. They fucked up, is what they did. And anyone running around trying to say they didn't fuck up as part of their master plan, you ask them, okay, what are they getting out of it? Because right now, it looks like they're taking a bunch of L's. And it's going to get worse. The more they try to fix the problem and get something out of it in hindsight, or get something out of it in the aftermath, the more they try, the harder they try, the worse it makes them look. And you have to ask yourself, I've been asking myself this since this whole thing kicked off. I've been, involved in the Palestinian movement for a little while. Some of the earliest protests I ever went to revolved around that. But I had a hard time wondering, thinking to myself, what do they get out of this? They knew they were going to get fucking pounded. They knew civilians were going to die. They knew they were going to lose fucking infrastructure. They knew they would they probably knew they were going to turn the electricity off and the water off. They understood this was going to happen. And then it hit me. Yeah, they knew. What Palestine has done, is expose, first of all, they didn't want the mosque to be fucking razed to the ground. And so they brought attention to that issue, which means now, of course, Israel will have a harder time accidentally blowing it up so they can build their glorious fucking Temple of David on site. So they wanted attention to that, but they also wanted to call attention to the fact that they've been suffering. They had lost over 200 people this year already before this thing kicked off. In Israel, where Israel had lost less than 30. So we're talking 230, 220 to 22, 23, 24, whatever the fucking actual numbers are. And that was this year prior to any of this happening. And this just keeps going on and on and on and on. The Great March for Return, where 10,000 of them were shot in the fucking legs, including women, including children. People were killed. Press people were killed. People wearing fucking Red Crosses were shot. And no one's paying attention. You can only take so much fucking abuse. They needed attention to be paid. They needed attention to draw attention to what was going on, and they chose this way to do it. And it was very effective. And they knew they would be pounded by it, by these rabid fucking Zionists and the IDF, but they also knew that that also would draw attention, even more attention, to their plight. So, it's a deeply fucking cynical game they're playing, sacrificing, lives of Palestinians and the quality of life of many tens of thousands of more Palestinians who didn't die, in order to draw attention from the world to how they're being treated and how the occupier thinks they can get away with doing anything they want. So when you think about it in terms of that, that makes perfect sense. It's a high price to pay. You send a message to your occupier. You're only going to take so much, and then in the aftermath, the rest of the world then takes a more studious eye or more critical eye to the role of the occupier, to the role of the IDF in Israel in this conflict. And maybe in the end that helps. Maybe in the end Palestine comes out of this in a slightly better position. Maybe people start questioning whether or not the United States should have veto power in the United Nations Security Council and the United Nations, period, in terms of sanctions and things being imposed, international law being imposed on fucking Israel, in terms of how they handle Palestinian question, the two-state solution. I do not believe this has killed the two-state solution. I just think this goes to prove that a one-state solution cannot. It's all Israel now, and Israel gets everything is a one-state solution, and let them live as second-class citizens in a quote-unquote Jewish state. That's not viable now, because now from how they act what they really think of those second-class citizens, and the fact that they see them as less than human, which is the thing that Roger Cohen talked about, and the thing that I've talked about multiple times. That's what brought this about. Anyway, that's my take on that. Let's do a little bit of news. So CNN is saying Israel calls on Gazans in the north to evacuate southward. Here's the impacted area. They've warned 1.1 million people living northern Gaza to relocate to southern part of the Gaza Strip. Across the Middle East, Gaza is among the smallest and most densely packed urban areas. The United Nations says it considers it impossible for such a movement to take place without devastating humanitarian consequences. And here's the map Israel has handed up. You got to get south of this line here. You got to get south of this line. For what? Well, like I told you before, if you are occupying a people and they willingly, on their own accord, decide, hey, we're going to leave this area just completely open, well, then the occupier gets to move in and take it. Maybe they get to send a bunch of fucking settlers in there. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And when I say it's not going to happen, I'm not the only one saying this. Something else that's of interest here. It's interesting they want the northern section. Israel shut off a gas field about 3 or 4 days ago. They asked, I think it was Chevron who runs this liquid natural gas field called the Tamar field. Tamar is, there's Tamar 2 here, but there's a Tamar 1 right here. This is Gaza. And as you can see, because it's Palestine, their international water, their international fucking maritime territory includes a couple of fields, but also it includes the Mari B, the rest of Mari B. They say Mari B is only here, but Mari B actually extends into Gazan waters. And so what Israel does is they slant drill into, here's a better drawing of it. Here you go. There's liquid natural gas. There's resources. And they are in the northern part. So if all of a sudden that border moves to the halfway point here and that little triangle gets gets shorter, gets narrower, then the rest of that field goes into, and they haven't got a slant to drill anymore, and they can actually fucking drill, and they get a bunch of fucking liquid natural gas out of it. There's all these different fucking images and maps. It's like they don't know what the fuck is going on, but Tamar Field has been shut down temporarily. It's not in Palestinian waters, but I get the feeling that the reason they're talking about the northern part is they want the liquid natural gas reserves. They don't let Palestine use it or access it. So they want to steal it. They covet it once again. There has been 1,800 Palestinians killed, 7,000 wounded in constant Israeli bombardment. This is from Press TV. The death toll from Israel's savage attack on the Gaza Strip continues to rise nearly a week after the regime launched its brutal onslaught on the besieged Palestinian territory. The health ministry in Gaza announced on Thursday that at least 1,537 Palestinians, including 500 children and 276 women, have been killed in 6 days of incessant Israeli bombing of the blockaded territory, and more than 6,612 Palestinians have been wounded in the bombardment. A lot of them have already been displaced. This thing says there is the number of 423,378, according to the UN's OCHA, have been displaced in Gaza. There is absolutely one of the what was his name? Robert McNamara did The Fog of War, and he said there are 7 fucking guiding principles to war. And one of them has to be proportionality. You know, you get a bunch of guys go out there and attack some police barracks and military little enclaves in Israel. Maybe they kill a couple hundred, maybe 200. You can't just bomb the shit out of the civilian fucking population until you're happy with the fact that you spent up all of their bombs and, of course, America's new bombs. Lloyd Austin just went to visit Israel, glorious Israel, and he walked around patting soldiers on the back, these thugs. And he was overseeing another shipment of American-made bombs to kill Palestinian children. Happily showed up there and took fucking videos and pictures. Yet another proud moment in the history of America's military might. Rearming the aggressors. Again, also from Press TV. This is not a beer. It's a fucking Pepsi Zero Mango. Refreshing. Probably a lot worse for me than beer, but there you go. Israel gives Gaza 24 hours to relocate south. Hamas calls it fake propaganda. It's kind of a double entendre, I guess. Israel has ordered the residents of Gaza City to evacuate the area within 24 hours in what it views as a precursor to a ground invasion by the occupying entity, after suffering serious setbacks by the Palestinian resistance groups over the past few days. In a statement released on Friday, Israel's military called on all people living north of the Gaza Strip, living north of Gaza Strip, which amounts to about 1 million people, to relocate south. Israeli military said it would operate significantly. That's, by the way, Gaza City is northern Israel. Would operate significantly in Gaza City in the coming days, and civilians would only be able to return when another announcement's made, after they bust off a peace for themselves, I guess. Quote, now is a time for war, said Israel's Minister of Military Affairs, Yoav Gallant. As he's somebody who's going to be fired, by the way, as the regime's warplane continued pounding Gaza for the 7th consecutive day in relentless attacks that have claimed the lives of at least 1,500 Palestinians, including some 500 children and 280 women. Hamas said the Gaza relocation warning was fake propaganda and urged citizens not to fall for it, also calling on Palestinians to rise up on Friday and march to Al-Aqsa Mosque in the occupied old city of Al-Quds in protest. Hamas armed wing, the Al-Qassam Brigade, said it launched 150 rockets toward the city of Ascalon in Israel in response to the displacement and targeting of civilians. They claim, what is this? Israel started its onslaught on Saturday after resistance groups launched multi-pronged Operation Alaska Storm, the largest military operation against the occupying regime in decades, leaving more than 1,300 settlers and troops dead and as many as 3 times injured. Okay, so there's a number there. I don't know if that's an accurate number or not, but there's that number there. Now, Gaza's home to 2.3 million fucking people. Most of them are young people. A good enough part of them are young people. So this is where we're at. I do not believe for a second that Israel has any intention of trying a ground invasion to push Palestinian civilians out of that northern section of Gaza. It would jive with the other, I forget the Israeli fucking, was it somebody from the Knesset or was it somebody from the Ministry of Defense who said that this is going to be a second Nakba? Well, that would jive with that because that's what Nakba was, forcing fucking, it's like a Bataan Death March or the Trail of Tears. It's forcing fucking Palestinians off their fucking land so that Israel can fucking seize it up because they covet it. So that would make sense. Forcing 1.1 million people to leave northern fucking Gaza and force them into even tighter confines in southern Gaza so they can take that fucking land would be a second Nakba. However, that's not going to be allowed. That's just not going to be allowed. And I guarantee you, and it's not just going to be Arabic nations or Muslim nations, Muslim nations. It's not going to be just Muslim nations or Islamic nations that push back on this. I mean, they're already losing. They're losing the PR battle. Israel is, and the Mossad fucking influencers. They're losing the PR battle all across the fucking globe, especially in European nations, especially in fucking and here in the United States. Let me wrap this up back to where we started. You talk about they let it happen on purpose. I've told you what the thinking, I think, from the Palestinian side was that yes, it'll be brutal. We'll send a message to them. We'll make them question, their citizenry question, who's in charge and how this is going and is it fucking worth it? Listen, let me just also say this before I jump into that, before I wrap up with that. Everyone knows I'm a huge supporter of Palestinian rights. The two-state solution going back to the June 1967, I think it is, the Green Line fucking borders, getting all Israelis, including settlers, out of fucking the West Bank. Big supporter of that. Big supporter of Palestinians. But I'm not somebody who doesn't know the background, doesn't know the history. Israelis, the older ones, the younger ones don't really know. It's just something that's taught to them, or they see it all day long in this propaganda they're fed. I'm sure they've become kind of immune to it. They've become numb to it. But there was a time when Israelis genuinely feared terrorist acts. These don't happen anymore. But back in the day, it was almost commonplace. Somebody would get on a fucking bus at 5 o'clock rush hour and detonate themselves in fucking Israel. Or go to a nightclub, or go to a football stadium or soccer stadium, whatever you want to call it. It was, or marketplace. It was, there was a certain regularity to it. And that had an effect. People were afraid. They were afraid of going to places where there's going to be large gatherings of people that might be a fucking target of opportunity. They don't want to go back to that. They damn sure don't want to go back to that. And yet, that seems to be where they are heading. That's going to make them, the citizenry, bringing back, these ideas, the memories of those days, is not going to be a pleasant thing for the citizenry. So when I say that the Palestinians had a plan, and the plan was to take a beating, take a hit, deliver a hit, and then take a hell of a fucking retaliatory beating, but in doing so, bring international attention to their fucking plight. That's a legitimate. You think it's a legitimate fucking game plan, and so far it's worked. In terms of Israel, I ask you to consider this. And if you don't think they're losing the PR battle right now because they got the stupid fucking beheaded babies story going on, if you don't think they're losing the PR battle right now, first of all, there's the beheaded baby story. That should tell you they're losing. But I will leave you with this. We'll go back to Jimmy Dore. What the fuck does Jimmy Dore know about Palestine? What does he know about the Nakba? What does he know about the Balfour Declaration? What does he know about this fucking conflict? Nothing. When's the last time you heard Jimmy Dore ever mention the word Palestine, or Palestinian, or Gaza, or the West Bank? And now he's got a shit ton of Norman Finkelstein interviews on his channel, which are being viewed by millions, and good for him. You think that was part of Netanyahu's plan to let it happen on purpose? I'm on the same page as Hamas. In that I don't believe that you can drop all the leaflets you want, but it's just they're trying to demoralize the population even more. They're trying to cause fear and panic. I'm sure that's what they're doing. This is psychological warfare. I don't see them trying to move in. Whenever they try to mount, I think the last time was Cast Lead. Whenever they try, or it might have been Pillar of Defense. It might have been Pillar of Defense. It might have been Pillar of Defense when they used the fucking white phosphorus, trying to use cover for their fucking for their armored personnel carriers, trying to make entrance into Gaza, and they got fucked up. Whenever they try to do that, the last couple times, they pay a very heavy price. Because again, these are fighters, the guys who are from Hamas or Qassam Brigade or whatever, and of course all the others. They are trying to invade their fucking home. So these are fighters who have a motivation to it. And on the other side, you have fucking 19-year-old conscripts who were just trying to get laid 2 months ago. And now they wear a stupid bag on their head and have no idea what they're fucking doing and have no idea what they're getting into. So it costs them a lot. I don't see them taking another fucking L. They know that, just like we know that. They'll do some more bombing because bombing's easy. Because you can't fucking fight it back against an F-16 that was donated by the taxpayers of Texas with fucking bottle rockets. It doesn't work. Or AK-47s. It doesn't work. So I see them staying nice and safe at 20,000 feet or 10,000 feet and dropping bombs on civilians before actually trying to put boots on the ground who will be torn the fuck up. Because the last thing they need is another big fucking L. To say, okay, we're doing a ground invasion, we're going to take half of fucking Gaza, and then they and they get pushed back out and they lose. Then everybody has to fucking resign. They won't do that. So that's where we are. I will keep you up to date this weekend on how things develop. I will also keep you up to date this weekend. I'll let you know this weekend how this personal thing shakes out. We should know by Saturday. Okay? Anyway, I thank you for your time. Have a good one. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.